No way. That's great. We landed on the moon!
That was from one of my favorite movies of all time, Dumb and Dumber. We landed on the moon! Okay, let me just get this out of the way. Planar magnetics are fantastic technology. It was invented for, hold it, NASA. That's right. Did you know that planar magnetics were originally made for and apparently are being used by NASA and probably other government agencies? How is NASA implementing this? I have no idea. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find an answer to that question. But more importantly, every planar magnetic headphone that you or somebody else has is theoretically from the sky, from the stars. That's not true, but you know what I mean. It was invented for space exploration in some way or form. I don't know what it is. Planar magnetics are relatively new in the headphone game. They offer significant advantages to a dynamic headphone. Now, dynamic headphones and planar magnetic headphones both use magnets. You probably already know that. The difference is really the power requirement between the two and the size of the driver between the two. Dynamic drivers tend to stay around about 40 millimeters. There are some headphones that have 90 millimeters, some headphones have 70 millimeters, but that's really rare to find. Most dynamic headphones will stay around the 30, 40, 50 millimeter range, or smaller. Then there's planar magnetics. And planar magnetics, I think a good example of planar magnetics is Odyssey and Monoprice. They both use 106 millimeter drivers. That's huge. Compare that, 40 millimeters versus 106 millimeters. Now, what is the first thing that pops in your mind when you hear about that, the size difference? Well, to me, it would be the power requirement, and that is correct. Planar magnetic drivers will require more power than dynamic drivers because of the fact that, well, number one, they're using two sets of magnets, one on each side of the thin metal film, about a hair's width. That's how big the metal membrane film is. Two magnets that are relatively large, requiring more power to move the little hair-like filament, versus a dynamic driver that has a magnetic coil that's just wound around. So there's only one real magnet, and it's very small. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I've been curious. Does a planar magnetic headphone work with a tube amplifier? Now, planar magnetics clearly work with solid-state amplifiers, especially solid-state amplifiers that provide a lot of power. For example, like the Shin Magni 3, which offers a lot of power and can easily drive the vast majority of headphones. Then there's the Audio GD 1 amp, which has 9.9 watts at 25 ohms and 600 milliwatts at 600 ohms. This thing is a beast. Just amazing. This will have no problems driving any headphone. But then the question is this: is there a solid-state amplifier that would not work with planar magnetics? The answer is yes, absolutely. There are plenty of solid-state amplifiers that will not be able to output sufficient power to really get the most out of the magnets inside the planar magnetic. Those same headphone amplifiers will work just fine for dynamic headphones because of the differences I've just noted. How about tube amplifiers? Can tube amplifiers work with planar magnetics? Well, of course they can. The question really is there sufficient power to make them work? That's the test today. What we're going to do is we're going to test the NFB 1 amp that I have versus the DarkVoice 336. The DarkVoice 336 is the tube amplifier. If you want a tube amplifier and you want to make a good tube amplifier purchase and you want to just listen to tubey sound that's unique, the 336 is the way to go. That this thing is not cheap. Clearly, it's $309. On eBay and sometimes on Massdrop, you can find it for about $200, $250, $280, something like that. But you should definitely try to get one of these if you can. Just make sure that the voltage is correct for wherever you live. For example, in the United States, the voltage should be about 110 or 115. Once you do this, you can start tube rolling, changing the tubes in and out, getting a different sound signature. And this 336, the DarkVoice, does in fact drive all sorts of headphones. Now on this website, it doesn't say exactly how much. It just says power handling capacity 1 watt. You see that here? 1 watt. Now that's a lot, but when you start actually using this amplifier, you will find out that it seems like there's a lot more power behind it than 1 watt. Now, I don't disagree with it being 1 watt. I have no way of measuring myself. I don't have any instruments to do that. But I suspect that the DarkVoice will be sufficiently powerful to drive the LCD-2 closed. That's the test. Finally, 5-6 minutes into this, I'm telling you what's going to happen. We have the DarkVoice 336. I have the 1 amp. And I have a song selected. Sleeping at Last, Atlas Space. We're going to go with the space theme, and we're going to play Mercury. These are very beautiful, haunting songs. I have the headphone plugged into the 1 amp. Again, the 1 amp is also connected to the SMSL S8U balance, so by 2 balanced XLR cables. My cable for the headphone is not balanced, so there's going to be a minor difference in volume, but not much. All right, here we go. There's detail in the background and kind of like a little bit of distortion in the back. Now, distortion purposely put into this song. Almost like when there's dead quiet in a room and you're just sitting there, laying there, listening, and you hear something hissing in the background, just a slight hiss. That's what I heard. I can hear minute strings. The voice is very smooth. No distortion at all in any of the frequencies. There's clear soundstage. The bass is present but soft, very gentle. Good, clear throughout the frequencies. Okay. So what did I hear? It sounds like a solid state amp, right? If you've ever heard solid state amps, this sounds like a solid state amp. It's very clear, it's very precise, it's fantastic, it's very powerful, all of that stuff with the 1 amp. But what about the DarkVoice? I've had the tubes here warmed up for about 20 minutes. I am unplugging. Okay, I have unplugged from the 1 amp, plugged into the DarkVoice. And let me switch to... Okay, so the DarkVoice is connected to the JDS Labs DAC. If I can find it on here. It's on here somewhere. Give me a second. I'm going through my... Here we go. LDAC. Okay. Here we go. The volume is about 8 o'clock on the volume knob. at 9 o'clock, it is about the same volume as the 1 amp at 126. And I'm going to start over. And I don't hear that kind of buzzing or that kind of fuzzy noise that I spoke of originally when I plugged in, I started in the 1 amp. That's not really present. What is present is more of an electrical background noise. It's not quite the hiss that I heard on the 1 amp. It's more of an electrical hiss. It's hard to explain, but it's definitely not the same. The bass response, there's a greater decay to the bass than there was on the 1 amp. Meaning, the resonance in the bass lasts a little bit longer. And it's not minute. I can tell that there's a longer decay to the bass. There's also not as much separation amongst the instruments and the frequency. Everything is kind of meshed together a little bit more. Not as much finite detail. Okay. So clear two very big differences so far. Number one, on the 1 amp, there's a lot of detail that comes out. There's, that buzzing, humming, fuzzy noise that I talked about. That was very clear on the 1 amp. I could hear clear separation amongst the instruments. I heard a lot of instruments. The vocal was separated, and it was smooth, but it was forward. With the DarkVoice, that humming, buzzing thing was different. It was more electrical than it was on the 1 amp. And two, the detail kind of just fades away into the background. There's not as much detail. And in fact, the vocals become more bled into the other frequencies. It's almost like everybody okay, so here's an example. You have a Rubik's Cube, and the Rubik's Cube on all the sides has different colors. Assume that is how the 1 amp displays the Rubik's Cube. Everything where it's supposed to be, every color properly arranged, right? Every block properly arranged. The DarkVoice, what it does is it switches and bleeds all the cubes together, the blocks together, so that there's no coherent differentiation. I mean, yes, there's a red side and a blue side, a yellow side, and a green side, and all that stuff. Yeah, but there's a lot more of the green pieces on the red side, the red pieces on the yellow side, and so it's kind of mixed up. It doesn't mean that you're losing the sense of the song. It just means you're getting a different experience of the song. Does that kind of make sense? And if you go back and forth between a solid state and a tube amp, in this case, 1 amp and the DarkVoice, you can tell a difference. And the 1 amp is pleasurable. It gives you all the detail if that's what you're looking for. And the DarkVoice kind of lets you just sit back and relax and just enjoy the soothing, haunting sounds of the song. Isn't that fantastic? I mean, it's just so special. It's so different. It's such a different experience of the same song with the same headphone, but with a different amplifier. Think about that for a moment. You can have a pair of headphones, a really good pair of headphones, and two amplifiers, say a true tube amplifier and a solid state amplifier. And you can get different sound signatures with the same pair of headphones and the same song, using the same file format. That is astounding. That's the joy of listening to music. How about we try something different? How about we get out of Atlas space? I thought I'd go with the space theme and instead do something like, let's go to the test playlist and let's do Drum Solo by Jack Bruce. The volume is at 9. Did I say 9 o'clock? Yeah, 9 o'clock on the DarkVoice. Here we go. So the bass impact is slower. There's more. There's a lot of decay to the bass. It's not as impactful. Although there's a lot of depth to the bass, right? Like it feels weighted down. It's not as sharp to my ears as I think it will be on the 1 amp. Yeah. So at this point, he just starts playing the drums back and forth. And I know this song very, very well. And I can tell you that on a solid state amp, those drum strikes, those hits with the drumstick, it gets like really precise and it's tight and it starts hitting you. With the DarkVoice, it's more muted, it's more laid back. It's like you're sitting there and you're listening and there's a wall between you and the stage. It's not a thick wall, but it's enough for you to just sit back and kind of listen to the song and not really be affected too much by it. You know what's going on, you hear it, but you don't hear all the details. It's more muted. And that's what the DarkVoice is doing. Now, I'm going to plug my headphones into the 1 amp. The volume is still at 126. I'm going to change sources to SMSLSU8. And here we go. Yeah, the decay is much slower when compared to the DarkVoice. The drum hits and then it immediately fades away. Much more precise. There's more air to the song. It's not heavy. It's not weighted down. The drum strikes are more precise. Yeah. The drum hits are a little bit more impactful. More detail and more soundstage. Okay? Does that kind of make sense? More detail, more soundstage on the solid state 1 amp versus less detail, a little bit more claustrophobic, but very easy, very smooth, very relaxed sound. That's what tubes do. That's what this particular tube amp does. I'm thinking, is there some other song that I can play right now that might... I do. Flight from the City. Okay? Great piano. Let's see how the piano reacts to this. Plugged into the 1 amp, 126 volume. Here we go. I hear the creaking as the pianist moves on his bench. There's that electric buzz in the background. That's very amazing. There's a string instrument of some sort that slowly builds up, and now it's audible. The piano strikes are, it thumps on the table, on the keyboard as he hits down on the piano keys. It's precise. The decay to the piano keys lasts. It's a natural decay to the piano keys, and I would say, like, right now, that lasted about 3 to 4 seconds after he got done hitting the last key. I still hear that buzz, and the string instruments now, the piano, great soundstage. Now let's switch to the DarkVoice. Volume is at 9 o'clock, changing sources. Here we go. I do hear the creaking, but the creaking is not as soft as it was on the 1 amp, strangely enough. The buzzing is there, but it sounds a little more distorted. The piano sounds heavier. There's less air to the music. And that's probably because it feels a little bit more claustrophobic. The string instruments are all in. There's a bleeding of all the instruments together. The impact of the piano keys on the keyboard is there, just not as precise as with the 1 amp. Yep. Okay. So this is also, I mean, it's a very pleasurable experience with the song on both amplifiers, but they both give you very different sound signatures. The DarkVoice bleeds all the frequencies a little bit more. So back to that Rubik's Cube sort of thing. The DarkVoice also kind of distorts the buzzing because of that bleed through. The separation of the instruments is significant, noticeably less. I don't know if it's significant, but it's definitely noticeably less. Whereas the 1 amp, there's clear separation, it's more airy, it feels like there's more sound stage, there's clear detail, it's more precise. So if you're looking for an amplifier for detail hunting, then solid state's got to go, right? I mean, that's the way it would have to go. If you want something that you want to add some warmth, and by warmth I mean a little bit more claustrophobic sound, less airy, less sibilance, that bring down the peaks and the higher frequencies. You want to kind of give a little bit of bump into the bass regions. Then a tube amp. If you want to just sit back and relax to your music and not really concentrate on it, let's say you're sitting there reading a book and you have your headphones on, plugging in the tube amp makes sense, right? Because it just drowns out. It's in the background. You're not really bothered by all the finite details that a very, very good solid state amp like the 1 amp might give you. Does that kind of make sense? Now, obviously not everybody's going to have the opportunity to buy the Audio GD 1 amp. I mean, it's readily available. It's available on Audio GD's website. It comes directly from China. I had absolutely no issues getting it ordered, getting it shipped, getting it delivered. This was as smooth a transaction as I could have ever hoped for from any manufacturer. So kudos. If you buy from Audio GD, at least in my experience, they show nothing but professionalism. They return my emails when I had questions. They were very responsive. Fantastic. So if you feel like you want to buy one of these, it's about $550 total with shipping, then this is a brilliant amplifier. But if you don't have this, there are other alternatives. Obviously, you can, if you only have up to $100, then the FX Audio DAC X6 is X5, X6, whatever it is. It's a good option. Mastrop has some solid state amplifiers that are of mixed result, but they're also agreeable options. But if you're going to that level, if you're going to pay about $300, then you might as well get the JDS Labs the Element, which is about $350, $309, something like that. And you get a DAC and you get a great clean sounding amp DAC. So I would go that direction more than the other. But then there's also the shit Magni, there's the shit Fulla, there's, you have so many options. A lot of options for solid state and not so many good options, affordable good options for tubes. So what I would recommend if you really want that tubey sound is a 336 SE. Now this video is not about the 336 or the 1 amp. I'm not doing a review on these things. I am just telling you that in my experience, a couple of things. One, different sound signatures. And two, the LCD-2 closeback can actually show you the differences between these type of amplifiers. Once again, the LCD-2 closed are amazing. You are able to get the details from one amplifier and a different type of detail from another amplifier. Completely different types of amplifiers, okay? That is the type of reference headphone that you should buy. You want a reference headphone that can tell you what the differences are between amplifiers, between sound sources, between the way a particular piece of music is recorded. That is part and parcel requirement of a reference class headphone. And in my opinion, the LCD-2 close, once again, does beautifully. Hopefully this has been of some help. If you are in the market to buy the LCD-2 close, rest assured, so far, wonderful headphones. Completely recommend them so far, but this is not my final review. And on top of that, these headphones do in fact respond well to both solid state and tube amps, specifically the 336. And I've tried the LCD-2s on all of my solid state amps, and it works great on all of them. If you have any questions, leave a comment. Otherwise, I will upload another video, hopefully in the next couple of days. Everyone, I hope you have a wonderful week, a wonderful night, and hey, audiophilia is a great thing, especially when you have great headphones and great gear.